So this video, I'm going to show you a lot of the same things we discussed in the part one, except we're going to show you kind of the concepts inside of Unity. So if I open up Unity and I have our two holes splined here with no trees, and I remember that our scene, which is over here, is our movie set. We have our camera, our lighting, our actors, and we're setting up, to film our movie. And we have our props over here. Inside of our props, all the way down at the bottom, we have two folders, one called trees and one called tree share, where we have the trees that are included with the base project. So we've got 6 inside of trees and another 4. So we've got 10 trees that are included. I would say for your first 2 holes, stick with these trees. And then if you want to start buying your own, you can look at some of the Discord channels, look at some of the advanced topics on creating your own trees, on buying trees, and then setting them up. I'm going to show you in here the components of these trees and how they're set up. And then you can use that information ultimately when you try to make your own trees or you try to import your own trees. You can use these as a good example of on how trees should be set up and used. So let's go just into our trees folder and let's go down. The broadleaf here is one of the most common ones. Now you can see in here, as soon as you see this asset in here, this object, and it's got this kind of green background with a white tree, you can tell that this at one time, this was a speed tree. And you're thinking, oh, don't you have to pay for speed trees? You do, but this is one that it was a free package that speed tree kind of promoted and give it to people just starting. So we now include it in the base package. And if you click on this, you can get some speed tree specific information over here. You can see information about level of detail and casting shadows. But ultimately what we're looking at is we made a prefab out of this. And how that prefab was made it's a little bit beyond the scope of this video. And some of the advanced will cover how to make a prefab. But this prefab, which is this block here, is really what we're going to be using to plant, whether it's Unity planning or VS Pro. What we're looking for is to establish and build what we call these prefabs. So I'm going to take this broadleaf desktop prefab and I'm going to click on it and I'm just going to drag it into my scene. And you can see when I do that it's kind of hovering up in the air a little bit. So I'm just going to take it and I'm going to drop it down so it looks nice. And now I've got it planted into the right spot. And keep in mind at this point, this is not Unity planning, this is not VS Pro planning, I'm just dragging something onto my scene to show you guys a few things about this tree. So now if I look over here, the tree that I just drag onto my scene, I now have a game object over here called Broadleaf Desktop. And if I expand it, I have a bunch of children objects. So my parent is this broadleaf, and then I have all these children. And this is where we get into a lot of these concepts that we were talking about earlier. So you can first, if I click on the parent, over here, Unity knows that this is a tree, and it's showing us that our level of detail for LOD 0, which is our highest level of detail, I've got that pushed out to, it's saying 95%. Well, that's LOD 1, so LOD 0 is 100%. And if I use this camera, you can see how far in, so this is saying this is LOD 0, which is the highest level of detail. And then if I slide this camera out, I'll get to LOD 1, which is the next level of detail, then LOD 2, LOD 3, and then finally what we call cold is what will be a billboard. I'm going to show you those things later on. So if we're way far away, it's going to be cold and do a billboard. But you can slide this in and out and get an idea of what those distances look like. So let me zoom back in here. So LOD 0 is our highest level of detail. And if you see, when I zoom in, I see the branches, I see the leaves, some of the leaves are even different colors. If you get really close, in some trees, you can even see like veins on the leaves, right? But you can see that the leaves, you got the stems connecting to the branches. And then if I come down here a little further, and sorry, the bark is even detailed, right? You can see it's textured. We can see different hues, some white highlights, and even here I got this chopped off branch, so it's pretty well detailed. But then as I move away and I get to like a LOD level 1, well, what am I looking at here? Well, I don't see much. I can't even make out the individual trees anymore. And if I zoom way out here, really we don't want anything. I can barely even tell there's a tree anymore. So that's why level of detail is important. We don't want to have too much level of detail far away. And for the most part, anything you see in the base project, these LODs are adjusted and you probably don't want to tweak them too much. They're in pretty good shape right now. So let's talk about the next thing, which is colliders. So underneath this parent tree, you can see that we've got our information for our LODs, which we talked about already. And we'll come back to those, but we also have our collision objects. And let me zoom back in here. And so for our collision object 0, you can see over here I have this thing called a capsule collider. And if I uncheck it and turn it back on, you can see it turn on and off here, which is essentially it's just a long, skinny capsule pill-shaped thing, but it goes way up inside the tree. You can see it comes, it goes pretty far up. And the material is GSP wood. And if I click on this right here, I can see that it's assigned GSP wood. So this material is assigned to like the trunk of the tree, and if someone hits it, it's going to act like wood. Let me go to collision object 1, which now we'll see is the sphere placed up here. And I've got lots of those. I got object 1, object 2, object 3, object 4, object 5, and they're kind of randomly placed. The reason being is someone hits a ball into the tree, it might go through. So what we want to do is we place those spheres in here in such a way that there's an opportunity for someone to hit the ball through, it might go through, or it might hit these direct and get kicked out. But the thing is, this is a sphere and it's assigned what? Well, it's assigned GSP leaves. All right. So that's just, I want to show you guys how basically colliders are set up and how they are configured and correctly here. Next thing, if I go back into, for example, LOD 0 here under the parent object, I get a lot more other stuff. I get the mesh renderer, which is basically telling us what the shape of this is, and it's the structure that holds the leaves, and it gets materials assigned to it. And then underneath this LOD 1, I can go into this material called branches, and I could potentially change the main color of the tree. So if I come down here, and I'll have some more videos on changing tree colors. I'm not going to touch it too much here, but I can come in here and I'm going to get this color palette. And if I start tweaking this, you can see it changes different components of the tree. So this particular material is the material that is the material for the branches that are connecting. So you might, if you want to change the branches of the tree, you might have to open up a couple different materials here. And you can see when I do that one, it's the most of the main part of the tree. So you could change both of these, but you probably want to change them the same color. Keep in mind the base trees, the colors are pretty good. You probably can leave them alone. They've been tuned pretty well. And you can see the same thing with LOD 1, LOD 2. One of the things you want to make look, and we talked about performance of these trees, if you go here to LOD 1, and it has our mesh renderer, which is our mesh, our shape, and how much detail on the shape of that tree. If I come in over here to mesh info, I can see I've got 7,188 triangles and 8,324 vertices. That gives you an idea of the performance impact of this tree. So what I said earlier, about 8,000 triangles is pretty good. So this is a pretty good, pretty well performing tree. Like it's 7,100. Now, if I go to LOD 1, less detail, right? Right, less detail because this has 4,400 triangles. LOD 2, 869, and then billboard probably isn't going to show up because billboard is just, this is what a billboard looks like. Like I said, it's just kind of like a blob from far away. But if you click on any of these, so there's LOD 1, LOD 2, slightly less detail. I'm sorry, LOD 1. There's LOD 2, even less detail, less leaves, less detail on the branches, and then the billboard. So as you move away from this, those LODs pop in and out. All right, so that gives you a good overview of trees, the components of trees, and if you bring your own trees in, the things that you need to look at and configure. Before we end this video, let's just do a little bit of exploring and a little bit of cleanup. One is we can go back over here to our broadleaf desktop that we drug in there. and we can just hit delete and it removes it from our scene, removes it from our hierarchy here. But keep in mind that it is still in our prop area. So we can still come back here into trees and we still see our broadleaf in here. We have like a conifer in here, which is like a pine tree. Same components, right? We've got LODs, we've got collision objects as well. There's elm, there's palm, there's white birch, and then we have the ones in tree share. Now, if you look in, so white birch, you can tell this was not a speed tree because there's no speed tree asset in here. The palm obviously was, because here's the speed tree asset that was imported associated with that. The elm doesn't look like that was a speed tree because there's no speed tree asset, but we still have the prefab in here. Tree share, we've got a maple, we've got a mesquite. If you go into mesquite, looks like there's a couple different ones. We've got one mesquite, there's another one here, a young one. And again, we can just come back, we can highlight and delete them. This is not how we want to plant our trees, but it is how we edit them. So if you wanted to, for example, edit this mesquite, and you really shouldn't need to edit these ones too much, but maybe you wanted to change the color. What you want to do is drag it onto your scene, okay? Go back to its inspector, and we want to switch all this to 0. Remember, anytime that we have like an empty object or we're making changes to things like a prefab, we want to put it in 0 space. Now we can go here, we can hit F. Oops, we need to highlight that, the mesquite. Hit F, and we'll fly over to it. Now we can make our changes. Now let's say that we wanted to change the LOD on here. Just for some reason, we're tweaking this more than it already was. We've made that change. Now we come back over here to our prop room, or not, sorry, this is our studio. We grab the mesquite and we put it back over here, and we're going to now update the prop room with the one that we changed from the scene. So now if we come back into this mesquite, we'll see that our LOD matches the one that was out in our scene because we overwrote it. We drug it back in and we updated that prefab. Just don't forget to come back over here and delete, because we want to plant stuff using the Unity terrain planting, which we haven't covered yet, or the VS Pro planting.